I want to welcome those who are watching online. You're in for a great study today. Daniel chapter 5. Good group of men who are here. Very encouraging. 6. What did I say? I am so sorry. Daniel 6. In fact, I spent all morning.
You got Ezekiel 9 up there.
Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me? Let's see what that is. We're going to start all over. Yeah. You guys are funny. Hey, Bill, thank you, man. Okay, forget everything you just heard or saw. Now we'll look at the screen, Bill, and we got it correct. We appreciate that. Daniel chapter 6. Our ladies are going through Ezekiel. You'll enjoy Daniel 6. Ronnie, come on up. And we'll get started here in just a second. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody that's in the room and those online, our friends in Australia, California, around the state. On the pads that are on the tables, I mentioned last week, they are for prayer requests. When you see those that receive the prayer request, you're going to see something a little different. Actually, this came from someone that watches us and mentioned that some of our older prayer requests, I took it and I had bolded every bit of it. And he suggested that I take some of the older ones and actually take and lighten it back up, and only bold the ones that are newest, or some of those that really are, that I feel are heavy on our hearts that we need to be praying for. So you're going to see things a little different. And again, I ask that if you know some of those that are on there that you have placed on there and need to come off, write it down so that we can remove those that are, that maybe have that are gone to be with the Lord, or maybe they've had God's help in their lives and they don't need to be on the prayer list. Does anyone know what I spoke about last week? And not you, Jerry.
Well, I really failed at this, but I can answer today.
I know. I spoke about idols last week. And so I ran across this a few days ago in our daily bread. And it's a good one because I'm guilty of it myself. Pastor Wade's also guilty of it too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. A spiritual dilemma. The average person checks his or her phone 150 times a day. Let that sink in a minute. Something has our attention, and it may not be for our good. Kristen Harris believes this. He's one of the voices in a film that features one of the top names in technology. People who ushered us into social media, but instead of praise, their voices are sounding an alarm, calling our reality and the film the social dilemma. We're the product. Our attention is the product being sold to advertisers. We give our attention to what we believe is valuable or worthy. And in a very real sense, what we give attention to, we can find ourselves worshiping. That word dilemma indicates a situation where a choice has to be made. Believe it or not, we face such a dilemma in our spiritual lives. A choice we have to make daily. Who or what will I give my attention to? In other words, who or what will I worship? The psalmist clearly made his choice. Every day I will praise you, God, and extol your name forever and ever. That's in Psalm 145:2. The verse that follows gives this rational, great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. The psalmist believed nothing compares to God's greatness, and so he focused his attention there. God and God alone is worthy of our praise. Like I say, I'm just as guilty of that. Here, I have my phone and I do attendance. But if you look I've got lots and lots of apps. The only thing is, I don't have an app for God. So if I take away from the phone and put time into my prayer life with God and not focus on my phone, it gives me a chance to actually praise Him. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Our dear, gracious, loving Father, we're so thankful and we're just so blessed, Father, that we have you in our lives.
That's right.
But Father, most of all, we need to remember to set aside time throughout our daily lives, because our lives are busy these days, but they're busy because we make them busy. Let us set aside time for you and you alone, and not to be busy with our phones or whatever else might be an idol to us, Lord, that will take up precious time that we need to be spending with you. Father, as we go into our lesson today, Father, open up our hearts and our minds to what you have revealed to us, so that, Father, we can grow in our relationship with you, and most of all, Father, that we can take it and spread it outside the walls of this building to tell others about the love of Jesus Christ. In your name I pray and I ask. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ronnie. Okay, Daniel chapter 6. You guys are such an encouragement, Mel. You get up early, you come out here, you discuss the scriptures. Tom, I noticed you commented on what I had written about finance and the basis trade. A little funny story to let you know how much I appreciate your love for the scripture and your love for the truth. I wrote a piece on the Babylonian exile a few weeks ago based upon all of our discussions from Daniel, Ezekiel, and so on. And Tim, I just thought, the average Christian doesn't know that the Babylonian exile is an Old Testament historical narrative that is true, but it's also a picture of what Jesus Christ has done for us. He endured our exile on the cross outside the city of Jerusalem and so on. So Jerry, I wrote a piece that I thought was extraordinary. Nobody comments. Nobody says a word. Nobody really reads it. I mean, you guys would. But I got an email last night from a scientist who was from Jackson, Mississippi, flew into Oklahoma City, and it was a delightful email. He was getting on his plane to fly home, and he got that email on the Babylonian Empire. I didn't even know who he was, but he follows Astoria. And he wrote the most encouraging email. It's the only one I received on that post. Now, I come to the post you commented on the basis trade, the stock market. I'm not going to go into the finance of it, but I explained what I think is happening behind the scenes. And then I posted it on X. Coach, 100,000 people read that. It's like the idols that you're talking about. You can say anything about the stock market and you say anything about Jesus Christ and it's like. But here's the deal. I don't fault the world for that, Tim. I think we need to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. We need to be able to communicate with people who don't know the Lord and then bring them in to the kingdom through relationships. So, guys, you're an encouragement to me because we're working through the scriptures. And let's begin.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because, I watched it online, but not really a question, more of a statement.
Yeah.
As Isaiah was about 150 to 170 years before Daniel.
Absolutely.
And if you go over to Isaiah 46,
Yes,
and
sir.
this is in regards to verse 27 of last week.
Yeah.
You go over into Isaiah 46 and verse 6. Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh silver on the scale hire a goldsmith as he makes it into a god. They bow down, indeed they worship it. And there Isaiah was already talking about
Yep.
the king and how he worshipped,
Go.
worship gold and didn't worship God. Didn't know anything about God. It's just like it's already being talked about.
Absolutely. Things never change.
You have a country that worships money. It's just like ancient Babylon, ancient Assyria. Here we go, guys. How many of you, by a show of hands, by the way, I really appreciate the honesty and your energy. How many of you are over 80 years old? Lift your hand.
I feel like it.
Okay. 2, 3, 4. Okay, you guys are my heroes.
2 months and I'll be there.
Really? You guys are my heroes. Gene, how old are you?
92, be 93 next month.
93. This guy right here works like crazy. My hero. We're going to look today at a story from Daniel's life when he is at least 83 years old. I think he's 84. And here's how we know that. I believe he died 537. Others may say he died 535. We know where he's buried. But last week, Ronnie mentioned it, we studied Daniel 5. We know when Daniel 5 occurred. Sunday, October the 11th, 539 BC. So when we come to Daniel 6, and Darius the Mede of Persia is now ruling the known world, and Babylon at least. Cyrus is the king, but Darius is the ruler of Babylon. It's got to be after October of 539 BC. So we're looking at 538, maybe 537. And you take a look at that, he's at least 83, 84 years old. He dies at the age of 85 or 86. So this story we're about to read is toward the end of his life. Now, where it happened is in the capital of the Babylonian Empire. But Babylon has fallen. And so the Persians have taken over. And Babylon has become a central city of the Persian Empire. But it's not the capital. Susa, and it's on this map, Susa is the capital of Persia. And the Medes and the Persians have come and conquered Babylon, and now they're about to conquer everybody else. Susa, by the way, is where Daniel is buried. And you can go see his tomb. He lived in Babylon, the New York City of our day. And as I said, in Daniel 6, he's in his 80s. So, guys, the inspiration we're going to get from this chapter, you can inspire people in your 80s just as if you were in your 20s or 30s. Never forget that. In fact,
I have enough trouble inspiring myself.
you know what I think one of the saddest things is in the Church of Jesus Christ? Is we exalt young people to positions of leadership and we ignore elders. The word elder has nothing to do with authority. The word elder means older. Now, I do realize Paul said to Timothy, let no man despise your youth. However, anytime there's an appointment of those who shepherd people, it's typically those who are older. Okay, now, this is vitally important. I'm not going to take long, but if you're going to understand Daniel 6, you got to understand this. And Sean over here, I know it's hard to see, but I'll go quickly through this, and then I've got a couple of pictures, and then we'll read the text. The world's first empire is Assyria. And an empire is a country with a king that crosses borders to invade another country, conquers that country, establishes a vassal, some say puppet king, puts that king on the throne, and the conquered people pay taxes to the empire. That's an empire. By the way, the world's first empire is 9/11. Prior to Assyria, 9/11 BC, prior to Assyria, You had island nations, city nations. You had nations and kings, but they didn't really go conquering others. They just stayed right where they were. You got to remember mobility, warfare, stuff like that. Assyria had the first standing army. They paid their soldiers and said, "Go conquer." Anybody can tell me what the capital of Assyria is? Nineveh. So when you read the book of Jonah, and Jonah, when God calls him to go to Nineveh, these are Gentile mighty warriors. Jonah's like, I'm going to Spain. I'm going the other way. And God catches him and sends him there, and a great revival occurs in Nineveh under the preaching of Jonah. By the way, this is just 40 years before the Assyrians conquer the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. 40 years, that's when Jonah went to Nineveh, 762. Within a generation, the revival in Nineveh was gone, and the children of those who were converted to faith in Yahweh do some horrible things to the women of the northern kingdom of Israel. The 10 tribes that they conquered. We call them the 10 lost tribes. So I tell people all the time, when revival comes to America, like it did during the great days of the Billy Graham Crusades 40 years ago, it doesn't necessarily continue to the next generation, right? As we see today. By the way, you want some good news? Gene, here's some good news. Revival is happening right now in America, the United States. Anybody want to take a guess where it's happening? College campuses around the nation. Revival at Baylor, revival at OSU, revival at OU. The entire softball team at OU has been baptized. Hey, I'm telling you. Now, my friend, it's the Lord, Gene, but my friend Charlie Kirk, I think, has played a role because he's going to these campuses preaching the gospel. Okay, quickly. Babylon conquers Assyria in 609 BC. The battle that happened, you read about in the Bible. It's when Josiah, the good king of Judah, dies at Megiddo. You read about the Babylonian Empire conquering Assyria. By the way, it was Nebuchadnezzar's father, Nabopolassar, that conquered Assyria. This is the Babylonian Empire. Now look at this, 609 to 539 BC. The Babylonian Empire lasted 70 years. The great mistake Christians make when they talk about the Babylonian exile of the Jews, of the southern kingdom of Judah, they say the exile lasted 70 years. No. 586 to 539. That's not 70 years. It's the kingdom of Babylon, Jeremiah said, would last for 70 years. That's what Jeremiah said. And Daniel knew that. And that's why he knew the kingdom was coming to an end in 539. In 539, October the 11th, Sunday, Persia diverts the Euphrates River. By the way, in the Bible, the Persian Empire, Howard pointed this out last week, is called the Medo-Persian Empire. Why? I'll show you the map in just a second. The Medes and the Persians are two peoples. They join forces to conquer Babylon. They sneak up from what we call Iran, Susa, Iran, and conquer Babylon while Nebuchadnezzar and his army, Nebuchadnezzar has died, as we saw, Tim. It's his grandson, Belteshazzar, that's now on the throne. They are celebrating in a big orgy in the palace of Babylon when the handwriting comes on the wall. It's that night Belteshazzar, king of Babylon, dies and the Persian Empire takes over. Now in the Bible, you read about the Persian Empire in Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Joel, and Esther. Esther married the king of Persia. His name was Xerxes. Now, Greece conquers Persia. Alexander the Great. You know, you'll hear on the news and you'll hear me talk about Western civilization and nobody has a clue what you're talking about. They're like, what's Western civilization? Well, I'll tell you. Persia came to Greece because the islands of Greece stopped paying taxes to Persia. And the Persian king Xerxes destroyed Athens, took it to the ground. And he was mad because his father had gone to fight the Greeks, and the Greeks had resisted. The Greeks had resisted the Persian Empire. You read about it in the movie 300. So Xerxes says, that's not happening again. And he goes with his army. And man, he wipes out Athens. Alexander the Great is born about 100 years later, and his mom teaches him to hate the Persians. Here's what I want you to see. Persia is east. Greece is west. Persia is conquered by Alexander the Great. It is the beginning of Western civilization. In fact, Xerxes loses a great naval battle. If you go to the Naval Academy, you study that battle, and that is typically the beginning of what they call Western civilization. And we don't have time. We're going to talk about it in Daniel 9. But here's the deal. In 324 BC, Alexander the Great reached Susa and married 2 Persian women. And he made his home in the city of Babylon, where Daniel grew up. And the Greek Empire rules the world. The world becomes acclimated to Greek customs. We call it Hellenism. And so the world becomes Hellenistic until this group of people, what we call Rome, decided they're going to throw off the Greeks. And in 31 BC, the last queen of Greece, Cleopatra, and her boyfriend Mark Antony are defeated by the Romans. And in that same year, Augustus rules himself Caesar of the world. And Augustus Caesar begins his reign. And he is king of the Roman Empire when Jesus is born. And what we're going to see is that Daniel outlines everything that happens here in the next chapter. Daniel 7, in Daniel 9, in Daniel 11. The everlasting kingdom of Christ comes during the time of the Roman Empire. In Daniel 2, we saw this. Look at this, and we'll be done. This is important because the Persians are ruling in Daniel 6 when Daniel is thrown into the lion's den. Why is Assyria not mentioned in Daniel 2? Anybody want to take a guess? Assyria is not mentioned because they're off the scene. When Daniel is born and taken into captivity, Assyria is defeated by the Babylonians. So the head in the statue of Daniel 2 is Babylon. Then the silver arms and chest, that's Persia. Then you've got the bronze waist and so on. That's Greece. Then you've got the iron legs. That's Rome. During the days of Rome, at the clay feet, that's the Jews. And the legs. Here comes Jesus to establish His everlasting kingdom. Guys, if you read Daniel and you think it's future, you're obviously not thinking with a historical mind. Now, watch this. This is very important. Gold, silver, bronze, iron. Babylon was known for its gold. Persia was known for its silver. You quoted it. Greece was known for its bronze, and Rome was known for its iron. Watch this. Babylon, the king is converted, and the people are converted under the preaching of Daniel. It is Belteshazzar that turns the people away from God. But at least we read about Nebuchadnezzar's conversion to faith in Yahweh in Daniel 4. Greece is almost as spiritual as Babylon. Not quite. Persia, almost as spiritual as Babylon, not quite. Then Greece, then Rome. Notice how the metals get harder. The further away you move from God, the harder you get, but the more powerful you are in the eyes of men. This is why the stone from heaven comes to bring down the kingdoms of men, to establish the everlasting kingdom. This is the statue. Huh?
As it gets harder, it also gets less valuable.
Oh, hey, say that again, Stan.
I said, as it gets harder, it also gets less valuable.
Now, you remember that. As the further you get away from God, the harder, more powerful in the eyes of men you become, but the less valuable you are. Yes, sir, Colonel.
Did Esther and Daniel know each other?
No, we'll talk about that. She knew of him, but she was born after he died. In fact, Esther is the last historical figure in the Old Testament. We're talking about the 4th century BC, around 380. And Daniel dies long before that. Now, what we're about to read is also a type. It's a great chapter, but our enemy is compared to a roaring lion. And here we have Daniel, which means God is my governor, or God is my judge, thrown into a world of lions. And he comes out unharmed. And here is the teaching. When your faith is in Yahweh, even when you're threatened with death, you walk among the lions and you are unharmed because of God's providence. Now someone says, now wait a minute. I know Christian people who die, who are harmed, who are persecuted, who are plunged through with a sword, who are sawn in half. No. That's not what we're saying. That's all God's purpose. What we're saying is, don't fear man, fear God, who can destroy both body and soul in hell. So, Tim, thoughts before we begin reading the text?
That's pretty good summation. I would say that the thing to remember about Daniel, which is difficult, is that it's written like it's a narrative, like these things are happening. It is not chronological, and that's confusing about it. But it is literally what's coming. It's
From his perspective.
told in story.
Yeah.
From his perspective, what is coming.
Yeah.
To the coming of the kingdom with Messiah.
Bingo.
It's not talking about anything any past that.
Yeah,
it's just
correct.
talking about what's happening
Yeah.
when Messiah comes, and puts an end to all of that kingdom's nonsense. And the thing to remember is, it's not the kingdoms in themselves that are important; it's the gods of the kingdom
Yep.
that are important. Each one of these rulers, from Babylon and everybody that turns to Yahweh,
Yep.
makes a statement. He is the God above all gods.
Yep.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing there with the destruction of those kingdoms is the defeat of the gods of those kingdoms, and
Yeah.
that's what's important.
Yeah.
And he's going to replace that with himself, with Jesus,
Yes.
as the
King of
supreme
Kings.
King of Kings.
Yeah, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Howard.
The last verse in chapter 6 says Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian, which makes you think that he lasted, a while after this versus, Darius
excellent.
is born and, takes
Yeah.
over and he's around for a month or two and dies. So
Yeah.
It makes,
Yeah.
this is an exact thing.
Yeah.
But, if he did that,
Yeah.
he was there for a while
Yes.
as the counselor and
Yeah.
all these kind of things.
Yeah, and by the way, you got to understand, October the 11th of 539, when he interprets the handwriting on the wall, he's in his 80s. He's not a young man. He's born in 622. And Howard is right. There's at least a few years that go by. By the way, Angel, good to see you, buddy. Good to have you back.
Good to be back.
Yeah. Huh?
Curtis Garner.
Al, Curtis, good to have you, buddy. Good to see you. Yeah, I kind of lived my life vicariously through Angel in Florida, when it was freezing cold here.
You want the belly.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Verse 1. It seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps, that's government officials, over the kingdom of Persia. By the way, let me show you this map here as we continue. We've got, here's Persia. The Persian people are beautiful people. This is Iran today. By the way, second aircraft carrier arrived. Guys, I'm just telling you right now, something is about to happen in Iran. And when that does, the Persian people, they are beautiful people. Who do the Persians love the most, the Persian people today? They love Israel. Who do their leaders hate the most? Israel. Something's cooking. All right, anyway, this is Susa, Persia. Look how large this kingdom became. This is the Persian kingdom. So 120 satraps are appointed. They even ruled over Egypt. This is why when you read the book of Nehemiah, the rebuilding of the walls, the satrap over Judah, they always mention him because they couldn't do anything without permission of the king of Persia. Make sense? All right, let's go on.
How did they get those those that were out in the different parts of the world? How did they get that information back and say, "Hey, can I do this or do that"? That would take a long time.
Here's how they did it. And you read about it in the book of Esther. You remember when the king was convinced to kill the Jews?
Yeah.
The scripture says, by the way, it became a law of the Medes and the Persians, which is basically, it's an irrevocable law. He said, send it out by dromedaries, camels, and horseback. Here's how they did it. They had basically animals that carried them swiftly throughout the kingdom. It would be like our old bingo. Bingo. The Pony Express wasn't new. Persian Empire had their Pony Express. Let's go on. Verse 2. And now watch this. 120 satraps over that huge kingdom. But then over the satraps, 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel, the Jewish Magi, or he's the chief magus, was one. Guys, this is a very high position over this kingdom. That these satraps might be accountable to the commissioners or the governors. I don't know what your translation says in terms of commissioners. Anybody want to? Governance? Okay, New King James, governors. That these satraps might be accountable to them, and that the king might not suffer loss. Meaning, the king's not stolen from. In these regions where taxes are collected, the commissioners, governors, hold the satraps accountable for the money transactions. Verse 3. Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps, because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. Guys, are you following that? I mean, this is incredible.
It's a lot like Joseph.
It is. That's precisely it. Think about all of the different things that are happening here that remind you of other Jewish stories that were the same. You know, he walks around on the roof of the house and thinks he's got things under control. Who do you know did that?
Yeah.
David, and before his fall. It's just a lot of these things remind you of other stories. Because that's what it is.
Correct. Verse 4. Now watch, they turn on Daniel. Then the commissioners and satraps began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel. How? In regard to government affairs. Nothing is new under the sun. Bingo. An accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs. But they could find no ground of accusation or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. What an incredible testimony. Don't you wish we had politicians in whom no allegation of corruption could be found because they are faithful and not negligent? Verse 5. Then these men, these satraps and governors, said, "We will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." Now, you know what that means? In terms of the government, we're not going to be able to accuse him of negligence. But what we've got to do is trap him in regards to the law of Yahweh. Try to get him to do something contrary to government because his commitment is to Yahweh.
Most likely Daniel was probably the only
Jew?
amongst all these.
No, great point. I would probably agree with that. By the way, we're going to come later in our study of Daniel, and Daniel's going to appeal to the Jews that are in their exile and captivity. They are comfortable and they are happy, but God has called them home to Jerusalem. And many of them are like, we kind of like the flesh pots of Egypt, the flesh pots of Babylon. Bingo, same thing. All right, let's go on. Verse 6. Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows. King Darius, live forever. By the way, Tim gave me a paper. Some scholars will say that Darius is Cyrus. I do not believe that for 1 second. Darius is a Mede. Howard pointed this out. Cyrus is Persian. Plus, I've read the biography of Cyrus. And Tim, he is called Yahweh's Messiah for the Jews in Isaiah 45 verse 1. I believe Cyrus had faith in Yahweh. I really do. Even before the conquering of Babylon. And I think God saved him, if you will, made him his Messiah, his Savior to the Jewish people. Darius is not like that. Darius' character is different. O Darius, live forever. All the commissioners, verse 7, of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the high officials, the governors, have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king. This is why Darius is not Cyrus. Besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction, sign the document, so that it may not be changed. And here's the phrase, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. You'll see this in Esther. The law of the Medes and the Persians means, once issued, it cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document. That is the injunction. In other words, there's no worship in Babylon of any god other than Darius. He becomes the god of the city of Babylon. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the document was signed, look what he does. He entered his house. Now in his roof chamber he had windows open toward Jerusalem, and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day. By the way, Muhammad the prophet, who was probably one of the most evil men to ever live, really, he read that verse right there, and he established a custom of praying 3 times toward Mecca. So when you ask the question, where does Islam get this idea that you throw out a mat and you pray toward Mecca? It's from right here. He amalgamated Christianity, Muhammad did, which he became familiar with in the 7th century AD, after Christ, and Judaism, talking to Jewish traders along the coast, the Mediterranean coast, and this is where he gets it. So if you ever ask the question, why do Muslims pray toward Mecca? The answer is they pray toward Mecca because Muhammad read Daniel and said, that's a good idea. So let's have them pray toward Mecca rather than Jerusalem. Howard.
Is it 3 or 5 times a day?
Oh, great point. He changed it to 5. Thank you, Howard. He changed it to 5. And by the way, I had to take an Uber from from Minneapolis to Milwaukee, and it may be airlines. It was back during that coding thing. And it cost a fortune. And I had an Islamic Muslim driver. And coach, there's nothing more irritating than paying for an Uber, and he has to pull over on the side of the highway, throw his mat out, and pray toward Mecca. And Rochelle and I are sitting in the car like, are you kidding me?
There goes the tip.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm like, am I in America? I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
We saw that in our flight over to Israel 2 years ago.
Oh, no, bingo. No, bingo, we did.
I had somebody crawl over me and I must have been asleep. I didn't even know it.
You know, religion without the Spirit leads to ritualistic practices, whether it's Judaism or Islamicism, and it's just empty. I'll probably get kicked off of Google
What
here.
I spoke about last week and this week, idols.
Bingo. And by the way, we have to be careful here because institutional Christianity can be the same way when the Spirit of God is not present. Yeah, we all know that.
When we want just,
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah. All right, here we go. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house, the roof of his chamber, second floor, and he opened toward Jerusalem. Now notice, he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God as he had been doing previously. That's incredible. In other words, this is not something new. He'd been doing it previously. Then these men, satraps, governors, by agreement, came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. And they say to the king, did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den? The king replied, that statement is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, and it may not be revoked. Then they answered and spoke before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you signed. He keeps making his petition 3 times a day. Then as soon as the king heard this statement, I love this, he was deeply distressed. It seems like he loved Daniel and set his mind on delivering Daniel. And even until sunset, he kept exerting himself to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, recognize, O king, it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed. Then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. Now, we're going to stop here to discuss. The king spoke and said to Daniel, your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you. A stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing would be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace, spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. Now, let's pause before we continue. The signet ring was worn on your finger. And what they would do is they threw him into basically a cave, which was most likely dark, with lions in it. Then they put a rock over the entrance. Then they sealed it with wax. And then the prefects, the satraps, the governors, at least those who were there, and the king come and stamp the wax with their signet ring. Why? So they could see if anyone rolled the stone, broke the seal, and rescued Daniel. That's why they did it. Let's go on. Verse 19.
Yeah, Howard.
Go ahead, Howard.
An alternative reading there verse 16 is, may the God whom you serve.
Ah, good.
So in one sense,
Yeah.
the king is almost praying.
Yeah. Good.
And also, since you mentioned it, if we go over here to verse 24, later he passes thing in, the other people in, he said they had not reached the bottom of the den before they overpowered it. So it may well have been a pit in the ground.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, very good. Very good. We're going to read a few more verses and then we're going to conclude. We're not going to conclude the chapter. We'll come back. But let's read from 19 until 22. And that's where we'll stop, 22. And then we'll take your questions. 19. Then the king arose at dawn, at the break of day, and went in haste to the lion's den. And when he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me. Inasmuch I was found innocent before him, and also toward you, O king. Look at this last phrase. I have committed no crime. You ought to underline that. I have committed no crime. Now wait a second. The leader of Persia, at least Babylon, Cyrus is off doing other battles, has issued an injunction, the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. You cannot worship any other god for 30 days except Darius. And by the way, Tim, this goes into the gods of the kingdoms, the gods of the cities, and Darius represents that god. So it's an honor to Darius, and basically you're breaching the honor of the god of Babylon, the new god of Babylon, Darius and his god, and so on. And Darius is the representation of his god. So don't worship any other god. That's a law. A law. And Daniel says, I have committed no crime in breaking your law.
The way they explain this is that when he called those 120 satraps from all over the conquered nations, when they came, they brought their gods with them. Now remember the ancient Near East. If you want to worship a god, it's just like this thing right here. You got to be in its presence, in its temple. You go there and you speak to that god. All these 120 gods are in Babylon, the city of Babylon. There's a lot of confusion, and these guys come up with this idea, since everybody has to come here anyway, say that nobody can offer petition to anybody other than you. This will unify everybody in all these 120 places under you. So you will be the one that they bring petitions to rather than this. Now later on he's going to send all those gods back to those lands. But you have to keep in mind that this is the way they think about gods. If you take that statue from that town or from that country and you take it someplace else, that god has gone that way. We saw this in Ezekiel, where suddenly Ezekiel sees the chariot throne of God in Babylon and he doesn't understand why it should be back in Jerusalem. You see, you have to think this way because that's the way they thought. So this will unify everybody if they bring their petitions or their prayers to Darius instead. Let me just throw in this one thing. One of the things you just said as to why Darius can't be Cyrus is because Darius is against God and Cyrus is for God. But in verse 14, he's made this decision, but he is hell-bent on saving Daniel.
Yep, good point.
And the reason why later on in 16 or 17 you find out why. Because he is already in his heart and his mind knows that Daniel's God is above all the rest. So what I'm saying is, and the reason why he brought it up is because it's possible that Darius
Could be Cyrus.
be Cyrus in that He
Yeah.
has like Herod.
Yeah, right.
Was not Herod's name.
Right.
Right?
Or
It's
Pharaoh.
the name, and you've
Yeah.
got these Hasmonean dynasty, all
Yeah.
these dynasties. So that Ahasuerus, the
Yeah.
name means something, but it's not his name.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? So it could be. Doesn't have to be, but it could be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what's going on here in the uniting of all of this.
By the way, that argument alone could convince me Darius is Cyrus, because I follow that. I follow that. It still seems to me that if Darius were Cyrus, he, even knowing what you've perfectly explained about all the gods, I'm saying he had already known Yahweh was chief among the gods. So it is a little difficult to see Cyrus saying, yeah, go ahead, worship me, petition me. But they convinced him, and it was only after it was Daniel is discovered to worshiping Yahweh, which I think Cyrus knew Yahweh long before. But we'll think, follow through.
You have to consider when these guys go to talk to him, there's 120 of them.
Yeah, agreed.
They don't send 5.
Yeah, right.
They go in mass. And he's ruling against the whole.
Ruling from Babylon and not Susa.
Oh, that's a great question. And Matt, thank you for that. And I will tell you this. Because Babylon is at the crossroads and even a more beautiful city than Susa, historians have said they moved the capital to Babylon and then summered in Susa. But that's a great question. Why would you move it from Susa to Babylon? Here's what's interesting. When the Persians are defeated by Alexander the Great makes his headquarters in Babylon too. And that's where he dies. He dies swimming in the Euphrates River. He gets sick. They bring him to the palace. Anybody know what Alexander the Great died of? He died of venereal disease, gonorrhea. And remember, he had just married 2 Persian women in Susa. So, I mean, all this stuff is just pretty incredible.
Cyrus was a Median prince, who married a Persian princess. And then later on, combined the two together. So you have the Medes and the Persians, and then later on it's the Persians.
Yeah, good point.
Or either that, I get confused.
No, you're right.
The Persians and the Medes, or the Medes and the Persians are
Right.
basically together. And it's because of Cyrus,
Intermarriage.
intermarriage
Yeah.
between the two.
And by the way, that's why in the Bible, the way you made peace with foreign countries is that you married the daughter of a foreign king. This is why most people don't understand when Abraham and Sarah went down and the king asked for Sarah and Abraham said, well, she's my sister. He was attempting to make peace with Judah. Frankly, maybe we should go back to that. And then Donald Trump would have to marry an Iranian and we'd be I'm sorry, it's a joke.
It didn't work.
It didn't. No, you're right, Tim. It didn't.
But you
work.
know, that's the whole point. If the king marries the daughter of this king over here,
Yeah.
we can't fight. We're family.
Correct.
See, that's the
The Medo-Persian concept. Okay, any other comments or questions? Yeah.
I like the fact that, with Tim kind of brought it up about how Daniel had been lifted up. The fact that, that when Darius had him thrown into the lions, he did with the signet ring. Well, the same thing goes back to Joseph in chapter 41 in regards to Pharaoh gave
Exactly the same thing.
God used.
Yeah. By the way, Ronnie, what you just said and what Tim said, these are stories. And those who don't know history, who are, forgive me for this term, but I got to use it, liberal theologians, what they'll often say is, these stories aren't true. They didn't happen. They're told to make a point. But a guy like me, who loves chronology and history, I'm like, don't fall for that, whatever you call it. These are real. These are stories. God is the God of history. It's His story. Other comment, Howard.
Both in Esther, where it talks about the palace And it talks about it being in Susa, and in Daniel 8:2, he also talks about how Daniel was in the citadel of
Yes.
Susa there. So
Yes.
it was the
Yeah.
citadel, the palace, if you
Yeah.
will, at Susa. So we have.
Good point, Howard. You've got the two.
This is what I was talking about last week, that when Cyrus gets there, he probably knows Daniel
Agreed.
because of his being like a diplomat.
Yeah.
You know, he's traveled.
Absolutely. Let me show you this map again because this is really cool. And now let me give you some perspective today, and then we'll take one more question. We'll be done. Here's India. Here's Persia. We call it Iran. Here is Iraq, where Babylon is. Then you've got Turkey up here. You've got the Saudi Arabian desert here. What separates Iraq and Iran are the Zagros Mountains. They are massive. Now, what's interesting is Susa is not far from Babylon, but it's protected by a massive mountain range. And Iran, if you ever see pictures of Iran, it's surrounded by mountains. Now remember, this is all desert. Mecca is down here. And what most people don't understand, Muhammad was a trader around Jerusalem on the East Coast in the 7th century. He knew the Jews. By the way, Jerusalem became a Christian city after it was destroyed in AD 70. Christians lived in Jerusalem. He knew Christianity, and he merged the ritualism of Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and Judaism, and came up with a third religion, Mohammedanism. And it's 700 years after Christ. But from Mecca, Islam means submission by the sword. That's why you'll see a sword on the Quran. Islam means submit. And if you don't, you're gone. They went here and conquered Persia. They went here and conquered Turkey. It became the Ottoman Empire. They went here and conquered Africa. And by the way, the fanatical Islamic revolutionary clerics were only defeated by Great Britain and the United States in World War I. It's called the Battle of Gallipolis. And I cannot tell you how many of our forefathers, including my uncles, great-uncles, great-grandfather, died at Gallipolis fighting the Ottoman Empire. Guys, the freedoms that we enjoy today, I wish I could get a hold of some of these leftist fanatics and shake them and say, you need to have respect for your elders who made the freedom you enjoy possible. Next week?
Question.
Yeah.
Right quick.
Question.
Here Daniel's in the den. Where's his three friends? Do you think?
Great question. Great question. Well, and
Because at the time, earlier in chapter 3, or we talked about the three friends, they believe that Daniel was probably out amongst.
yeah, I think, and I'll answer this and we'll close with this. It's not just Daniel's three friends. It's Daniel's tens of thousands of friends. The Jews. I'll tell you where they are. They're in Tel Aviv. But probably what they're afraid. They're like, we could die if we show our faith in Yahweh. So I think that's one of the reasons Daniel was so bold. He was doing it on behalf of others. So where are they? They're living in Tel Aviv, not Tel Aviv, Israel. Tel Aviv, Babylon. And by the way, Jeremiah 31, Jeremiah writes to them and says, build your houses, plant your garden, blossom where God has planted you. So it's a big city, and it's about the distance from Babylon Enid is to Wacomas. It's not that far, and there's thousands of them that live there. And I'm sure they're shaking in their boots because Cyrus has said, you can go home, but now they've got a law that you can only worship Darius in Babylon. Well, I think Daniel is their leader, and I think they're inspired by him. And by the way, we close with this encouragement. Your grandkids and your great-grandkids, they are looking at you. Inspire them like Daniel inspired his people. Tel Aviv, in 1948, when Israel became a nation, there were some farmers just to the west of Jerusalem who wanted to build a city, and they did. And to honor their forefathers who were in Babylon in captivity, they named it Tel Aviv. In English, we don't say, in Hebrew it's Tel Aviv. But they named it in honor of Tel Aviv, Babylon. But it's Tel Aviv, Israel. And, everything is so interconnected. Next week, we'll pick up Daniel 6, verse 23. Great discussion. See you guys.